The evening before the wedding felt like the universe had collapsed into the hollow space behind my ribs. I didn't plan to stand outside my apartment window, watching the city blur into streaks of gold, or to feel as if every heartbeat echoed with the name of a man who had long stopped loving me. Yet there I was, clutching a wedding invitation that still carried the faint scent of a memory I had spent months trying to forget. The world outside was moving, cars humming, lights flickering, strangers laughing. Yet deep inside me everything had frozen in a thick, unbearable silence that felt like a storm waiting to break. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who needed someone, anyone, to stand beside her for protection, from a past she once believed would be her future. But grief is strange like that. It changes us in ways we don't see coming. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the unexpected ways life can heal us, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach more people. I could have ignored the invitation, thrown it away, pretended it never arrived. But fate, cruel and ironic, had wrapped it in a way that felt like a dare. My ex was getting married, and not just to anyone, but to the woman he had once assured me was just a friend. The words had felt like needles then. Now they felt like old bruises that ached under new pressure. And so, on a night when my courage felt thin but stubborn, I found myself typing a message I never thought I'd send. A request, a plea, a strange mixture of vulnerability and desperation, asking my boss, my CEO, to be my date for my ex's wedding. I didn't know what I was hoping for, or whether it was foolish to imagine he'd even consider it. But the weight of shame and heartbreak made me hit send anyway. He said yes, not out of pity, not out of curiosity, but with a calm certainty that somehow softened the ache in my chest. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through, the city and spilled warmth across the floor, a strange sense of steadiness settled inside me. Maybe it was foolish to think his presence would change anything. Maybe it was reckless to rely on someone who lived in a world so much larger and more powerful than mine. But for the first time in months, I felt like the ground beneath me wasn't trembling. The day of the wedding was a carefully stitched illusion of beauty. The venue, a grand sunlit estate with stone pathways and rows of delicate white flowers, shimmered under a soft golden glow. Guests moved like ripples of color through the courtyard, their laughter rising like a quiet symphony. Yet beneath that polished surface, my heart felt heavy, uneven, like it was wrapped in thorns. Every step forward felt like walking into a past I wasn't sure I was ready to face. But the CEO walked beside me with an ease that surprised me. His presence didn't feel exaggerated or forced. It felt grounding, like he knew the conflict I was hiding beneath the steady breath I tried to maintain. The moment we stepped inside, heads turned, not just toward him with admiration, but toward me with curiosity that bordered on disbelief. I had spent months feeling invisible, but suddenly the world felt too aware of my existence. And yet, strangely, instead of shrinking, I felt taller. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, his quiet confidence radiating like a shield around us. Maybe it was the subtle way he placed his hand at the small of my back, not possessively, not performatively, but gently, like he was offering reassurance without demanding anything in return. The ceremony began, and as the bride walked down the aisle, I felt the old wound in my heart tear slightly. Memories flashed like flickers of film, pieces of what once was and what had been promised to me. It wasn't jealousy that struck me, it was mourning. Mourning for the version of myself who had believed in a love that wasn't meant to survive. The bride looked beautiful, radiant even, and my ex, standing tall, composed, ready, looked like a stranger dressed in the skin of someone I had once known. I could have cried, I could have walked out, I could have let myself break. But something unexpected happened. The CEO didn't move dramatically, didn't draw attention, didn't even look at me with pity. Instead, he slightly turned his body toward mine, enough for me to feel the warmth of his presence, enough for me to know that I wasn't alone in the moment I feared most. It was strange how such a small gesture could feel like a lifeline. It was even stranger how, for the first time, I wasn't looking at my ex with longing, but with the realization that some chapters are meant to end, even if they leave scars behind. As the vows began, the courtyard fell silent, save for the gentle whisper of the wind brushing through the leaves. Words of commitment, promises of forever, declarations of love spilled into the air. I expected it to hurt, to feel like salt poured into an already open wound. But instead, something softened inside me. The CEO stood beside me, and though he never said a word, I felt an anchor I hadn't known I needed. It was as if his silent presence reminded me of something I had forgotten, that I was allowed to heal, allowed to outgrow what once hurt me, allowed to let go. He stayed through the vows. He didn't excuse himself. He didn't shift uncomfortably. He didn't step away. He stood, steady and unshaken, as if it was the most natural thing in the world to stand beside a woman who was watching the man she once loved promise forever to someone else. And in that moment, something inside me loosened. Maybe it was acceptance. Maybe it was freedom. Or maybe it was the realization that life sometimes sends us people not to complete the story we lost, but to help us begin a new one. After the ceremony, guests mingled under strings of soft golden lights. The air was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and soft music blending with the fading sunlight. I breathed a little easier, feeling like the hardest part had passed. Yet, deep inside, I wondered why the CEO had stayed, not just physically but emotionally present, attentive in a way that felt far more intimate than I expected. He didn't ask if I was okay, and I didn't thank him. Somehow, both of us understood that some emotions don't need to be spoken to be shared. As the night deepened, I noticed my ex watching us from afar. His expression was unreadable, perhaps surprise, perhaps regret, perhaps the realization that I was no longer the woman he had walked away from. And for the first time, I didn't feel the sting of his gaze. Instead, I felt strangely empowered, as if the world had shifted on its axis and I had finally found my footing again. The CEO guided me to a quieter corner of the courtyard, where the hum of conversations faded into a soft, distant murmur. The lanterns above cast a warm, amber glow, and in that gentle light, I felt something inside me unravel, a softness, a vulnerability, a quiet courage that whispered that it was okay to begin again. Not with him necessarily, not as a romantic promise, but in myself, in the belief that I was more than the heartbreak that had once defined me. Life doesn't always give us closure in a single moment. Healing doesn't happen in a straight line, but standing there, feeling the cool evening breeze brush against my skin and the steady presence of a man who chose to stay, I realized that sometimes closure isn't something that's given. It's something we create. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world and helps us bring more heartfelt stories to you. Special request: comment below what moment of the story moved you the most. And as the evening came to a gentle close, I walked away from the wedding, not as the woman who had been abandoned, but as the woman who had finally found the strength to let go. The CEO walked beside me, not as a savior, not as a replacement, but as a quiet reminder that healing often arrives in the most unexpected forms. The night wasn't about love found or love lost. It was about rediscovering myself, about reclaiming the pieces of me that had been scattered across the past, about realizing that I was worthy of a life far greater than the one I had clung to. And as we stepped into the cool night air, the world felt different, not because of him, but because of the way he helped me see myself again. A woman capable of rising, of healing, of beginning again. A woman who no longer needed validation from the past to believe in her future. And that was enough.